and let them know that it's okay if they liked it last summer and they don't like it this summer. It doesn't make them bad. It is what happens as there are growth spurts in different parts of the brain. And that's why we just do these things so that we can discover those things.
I don't know if it's a flaw in the programming of parents, but every parent that I've talked to, and myself included, marvels at the fact that our kids grow up. That they grow up and they change, that their interests change, that they once held our hands and then the next day they don't want to even have us say goodbye to them in front of their friends. It's so unique and so weird and can be really jarring. And in fact, sometimes it puts parents in really dark places. Well, today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, we're going to talk about that. What do we do as our kids grow up? And how can we have a better posture of their changing and developing, especially in the teenage years, so that we can really glorify and honor the Lord in our call to parent our kids for the rest of their lives? Let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Koch.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So Dr. Kathy, Cindy Gatewood posted a video to TikTok recently that is really gaining in popularity. She's a 43-year-old mother who is looking forward to summer. It was really, as she says, kind of a time for her and her 3 children to take a proper break and really adjust from some different things that have kind of become hectic in their lives. But this summer, she realized that it would be different, a different season than really past summers, as her kids are growing up, kind of out of their childhood years, she says, and they're transitioning into now preteen and teenage years. Her video's gone viral with nearly 1 million views, and she laments that summer is really hard with teens. She says, quote, "You know what's not talked about enough? The guilt that comes when you have teens and preteens during the summer and you're home with them. But it's like they're too old to go to the playground every day. And it's like, should I be doing something? Should I be taking them somewhere every day? But when I ask them, they don't want to," end quote. Dr. Kathy, I have teenagers, so in my heart, I'm kind of like, hey, welcome to the party. This is a little bit natural, but I'm kind of asking too, should parents expect this kind of engagement from their teens? Or should we really fight back against that idea of, I don't really want to do things and what have you? How should we really manage our teens and encourage them as they're changing and developing, especially with different things that are like, teen angst or teen concern or teen, you're too cool for me, dad, kind of things?
This is really interesting and evidence, again, of the research we've read about the sadness epidemic in moms with children these ages, because they can't have relationships and the rhythms that they totally have enjoyed, most of them and many of them as moms. So yes, it's natural. Teenagers are beginning to want their independence. They want their own authority. They don't want to be treated like they're immature and they're going to go swing on the swing set. I do think parents have a right to say, tomorrow we are going to do this, just like you would have when they were 5. Tomorrow we are going to go visit grandma. So I think if you know your kids well and you know what they might really enjoy, then it's easier for you to choose things. But again, I wonder how often you could take kids somewhere where they didn't think they'd enjoy it and they end up loving it. The Art and Science Museum, or Science and History Museum, or the Botanical Garden, or the homeless shelter on a tour that you've arranged, or like where I live, you can take a tour of the Treasury. I live about 20 miles from one or 2 places in America where our bills are created. The tour is fascinating. And boy, the security, as you can imagine, to get into the tour is amazing. I also live very close to a very interesting tour of a company that makes bread and hamburger buns and hot dog buns. It's a fascinating tour. And I wonder if we could look to see what's available. If you have an engineer type kid, he or she would like that kind of stuff. I wonder if your kids could go and interview people who have jobs similar to what they think they might want to do someday. So there are things that we know would be good for them, out of the house, physical exercise, of course, vitamin D, hanging out with friends, serving others, visiting with grandparents and aunts and uncles. We can help them use their time wiser, especially if we know what they might be more willing to do with a quick yes. But even if they're like no isn't an option. We're going to do this on Wednesday at 10 a.m. So just psych yourself up and get ready. So I'm pushing back a little bit. They're not in charge. Teenagers might think they are, and they're more in charge than when they were 7. I respect that. But ultimately, as moms and dads and grandparents, if you believe it would be good for them to experience something together, then I want to encourage you to make it happen.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I do think that that's really important. How do we find out, though, like those things that our kids might like to do? Because teens, I would say, really change. They develop new interests. They might have seen, some guy play saxophone on the corner, and now all of a sudden they're really into saxophone music. How do we kind of deal, or I wouldn't say even deal, but recognize their shift because they are changing so dramatically, and many times not even just in their thinking patterns, but also in their bodies and in their chemical makeup inside of their bodies and their minds and things like that. It can just feel like the whole world is uneasy. We don't know for what kid we're going to get today when they wake up. So how do we address really understanding where our kids are at and then what their new interests might be?
Yeah, it's such a good point. So the more we know our kids, the more quickly we can pounce on something that has been indicated as an interest, right? So that we don't wait 2 weeks. So that might be some advice I would have based on what you were just saying. We have to observe them. What's even their search history on Google? Like you should be looking at that, not just because you think something bad might be going on there, but what are they searching for? And that they might not come to you and say, I'm fascinated by a career as a hairdresser, or I've just been investigating, this whole rainforest or the whole, weather. And I just don't get what people are all upset about. So what are they searching for? What are they talking about? What questions do they ask? And then how could you relate those things to things that are going on possibly in the world, possibly in your community that you would relate those things to? Who do you know in your church or your social settings or workplace who has similar interests that you could invite over for dinner? You might not like the idea of hairstyling, or beauty might not be your thing. So who do you invite over for dinner so that your daughter is affirmed in that, or your son is blessed by that? I've said this before, but you can take this or you can leave this. But I was checking out on bed and breakfast just yesterday as we're recording this today. And like at a lot of hotels or bed and breakfast, there was a rack of tourist brochures, and there was a really beautiful map of the county. And you could take that and you could say to each one of your kids, find something on this map that you want to go explore with me someday in the month of August. And everybody in your family would find something, someplace they've never been, someplace they remember going when they were 8 and they'd like to go back. So there's a lot in our communities that we forget about or we don't even know is there. And hotel or highway rest stops will give you sometimes the best view of what your own community offers.
I love that, Kathy. That is such a good kind of habit. Here's something, now pick it, right? You kind of set them up and say, we're all going to pick something from this thing. I think it kind of speaks a little bit to even like how they're kind of view things. I would love that because I'm picture smart. I love to see where things are at. But what about the kids that might have a different smart, or, I think that that's also kind of a way to address, kind of their interests. How do we understand or discover what smarts our kids are? And maybe even how does that interface with a little bit of their identity they're building? As kids mature and kind of age up, they're not necessarily, retaining the same, I would say, probably identity structures. Their security might feel a little bit different. Their idea of belonging is different. And so I'm really kind of interested, is there a way to look at this topic really from that idea of, our kids are smart in different ways? I'd love to hear you say that a little bit. And then how do we help our kids build their identity, knowing that it probably is changing when they're in their teenage years?
Yeah, good questions again. We have all these 8 smarts. So, all of us are word smart. If you have a daughter who loves to read, write, speak, and listen, your daddy-daughter date could be at a Barnes and Noble bookstore. And you just both find a book and sit in a comfortable chair for 30 minutes and read. And you peruse the aisles, and your daughter hangs out in the cookbook section because she wants to bless her mom with a new cookbook, or, whatever. If you've got a kid who's picture smart, body smart, you go hang out at a Hobby Lobby type store. A logic smart, body smart kid goes with you to a car mechanic store or to a Lowe's type place, Ace Hardware. My dad had a big affiliation with Ace Hardware, so I like to actually shop there just to bless my dad. And so you walk the aisles of the Ace Hardware store and you imagine what you could build with all of those nails and washers and screws and pulleys and stuff. And, some of the kids will be really into it. And especially if you're participating, they'll enjoy it a lot. People smart people engage with people. So allow them to have friends over and encourage them to go, to a friend's house when invited. And self-smart kids love quiet. So go to the park and let them be quiet. Or if you go to the zoo as a family, because that's a brilliant nature smart thing, but you have two self-smart kids who think deeply inside of themselves, don't talk all the time at the zoo. When you're standing in front of the giraffes, you don't always have to ask, what part of the giraffe do you like the best? How tall do you think they are? I wonder how old they are. What continent would they be at if they were in their natural setting? You don't have to. The logic smart part of you is going to interrogate them all the time. And the self-smart kids are going to be like, would you just leave me alone? I just want to look at the giraffe. So, if we know our kids, we know, again, what will be a blessing to them. Music smart kids, listen for music in the environment, the wind that is blowing through the leaves, and go listen at the fair, go to the, festivals that might be held in August, September in your community, and let them know that it's okay if they liked it last summer and they don't like it this summer. It doesn't make them bad. It is what happens as there are growth spurts in different parts of the brain. And that's why we just do these things, so that we can discover those things.
As Dr. Kathy was talking, it reminded me of a passage that comes out of Genesis chapter 22, and I'll begin reading at verse 6. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went along together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered him, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went along together. And when they reached the place that God had told them about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. And he brought Isaac and laid him on the altar. And on top of the wood, Isaac sat. And then he reached out his hand and took the knife, and he was ready to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," replied Abraham. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," the angel said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Now, this might be a little bit of a funny passage as we're talking about understanding and knowing our kids, but there's a reality here that I think is really special and kind of unique. God knows really who Abraham is. He spent time with Abraham. Abraham has spent time with God. They've talked together. Abraham's prayed. They've been in, unique situations together. And yet there's something that God has Abraham do here. It's a physical action. And in that, the angel of the Lord says, "I know you now. I know now that you fear the Lord your God." What would that look like for us to step back and say, man, now I know a little bit better who you are because I've seen you do your art, or I've seen you speak well to your friends, or I've seen you in your quietness, in your quiet places. What if we tapped into some of the smarts, like Dr. Kathy said, and really get a chance to know our kids? I wonder if that will cause them to have some security and confidence as they live in really a world that increasingly presents itself as dark. I think they could be a bright light and shine and cut through dark times, knowing that their parents know them, not just know who they are, but know them in their actions. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Facing the Dark. If you haven't done so yet, we want to encourage you to go and sign up for our online course. This month, we're actually talking about awakening the smarts. You can sign up for this at our website, celebratekids.com. And on the 12th, Dr. Kathy is actually doing a live Q&A on this course. We want to invite you to it. So please go to our website, sign up for the course, and join us for an online conversation. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender. Thanks for joining us this week, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again on Monday.